Welcome. We at OTOK, including our partners in Western Kansas, work to adopt data-driven decisions, and in so doing, we've come across a phenomenon known as the last mile. The last mile refers to a crossroad between data people and decision people, and data people may say, well, here's the evidence, this is what we know, and decision people say, that does not fit with my experience, and I think your numbers are wrong. So the data people have worked for months gathering, collecting, analyzing data, and bringing it to the table. The decision people have worked for months with people in situations and have a pretty good idea of what they believe needs to be done next. So during our study circles, you may recall that we faced a few of those instances. We asked KDOT for data, we organized it and analyzed it, and presented it to our community stakeholders. Someone would speak up and say, that cannot possibly be true, that doesn't fit with my experience. And in a blink, the discussion focuses on those discrepancies and arguments and away from the core question that initially brought us to the table. So after much work on both sides, the objective sometimes gets sidelined in that last mile. We're almost there, right? So in this segment, we hopefully will understand a little bit better about how to use that last mile in making data-driven decisions. So why do we need to pay attention to data? Well, as Mark Twain reminds us, education consists mostly of unlearning what we already know, right? So we develop cultural myths, and here's just a few of them. There is no crime in rural places, right? Most youth in secure facilities are violent offenders. Juvenile crime is on the rise. Those girls are getting more and more violent. So we developed these cultural myths, as Dr. Coates reminded us, and just like personal narratives, they can be perceived as realities, which then become enacted. Well, here in the research world, we're trained to focus on the quality of data and how to best interpret it. We look at validity and reliability. Are our definitions precise? Are we measuring what we think we are measuring? Can the findings be replicated? And are they consistent across time, place, and context? In looking at our local data, we ran into this last mile problem, especially with the arrest data, if you might recall. As it turns out, the data were accurate, but reading it, interpreting it, depends on these definitions, the measurement, the consistency, and the handling of sensitive data, especially with youth. You might also recognize this little acronym, garbage in, garbage out. This is another problem with data. We can only read what is input, and sometimes it's incorrect or possibly missing altogether. So then we have to reassess the situation. So at the local level, though, we often know what we need to know, and it starts with the kids, right? Tony is one of the justice-involved kids. Multiple measurements have consistently demonstrated that a major risk factor for Tony is the lack of pro-social engagement, typically considered as leisure activities. So, and indeed, Tony's case manager suspects that Tony could benefit greatly through positive community and school activities. So then we began a little data journey to try to check all of this out. And we're going to talk about 3 different questions for simplicity's sake here. First, what do I know? Secondly, what do I need to know? And thirdly, what is knowable? So let's first start with, what do we actually know? Well, we do know about the risk factor for Tony. That has been established through multiple measures, ones that have been tested through time and that are reliable. Indeed, pro-social engagement is a risk factor for Tony. So second, what do we need to know? What kinds of programs, for example, are effective in reducing risks for kids like Tony? Are those opportunities available here? And does Tony have access to those opportunities? Again, in the research world and in education, we know a lot about how to start, at least, in going about this. We look to lit reviews, we find out what the leading experts have done and tried and said and discovered and written about. We can do that pretty easily. We can check evidence-based programs and see which ones are most promising in reducing a risk such as Tony has. So we can get started on that. To do more, though, this is one of our light bulb moments. We have to take it local. So one of our tasks is to enhance the capacity of local communities to gather, interpret their data, and use those in data-driven decisions. And here we've discovered, we finally had this sort of light bulb moment. The only way we can understand the local data and problems, at least under our current system, is to go local, and that means to go to the people who are closest to the problem with data at the local level, and that's our juvenile justice administrators and their crews. And so that's what we did. We worked side by side with our two partners in Western Kansas and had some pretty outstanding results. It took a team approach. We went in to discover what they already have, what they have access to, how it's collected, how we can analyze it, how we can better develop a system at the local level to answer some of the questions. We also needed to consider their funding, their human resources, their staffing, and also always sustainability. Again, in education and in the research world, we can partner. We've discovered that this team approach is really useful on both sides. We can form partnerships and collaboratives, we can evaluate, and we can bring those kinds of resources to the table in a useful way. So finally, how do we use what we know? We can use our data to write proposals. You've already learning a little bit about how we've been able to do that. We can improve our strategies for programming. We can inform policy. We can look at the best practices and find out the best quality in terms of how to deliver those practices. And as we're learning now, we can even use social distancing and data to better understand what we're facing and how we can work with it. One of the things that you're going to learn in the lightning talks is about how we can partner also in bringing different programs, maybe like after-school activities in Jeff Ward's presentation. All of this is a process. It's not a one-shot point in time, right? It's an iterative process that we can do together. We can continue to learn as we go and improve as we go, bringing success to the table. Becoming data ready is really, really important. Sometimes we just have to ask, to reach out, to understand that we take the long road view and that we are preparing for the future all along the way as we take those steps. Replication is really important so we can see what one another has accomplished and begin to try out those steps as well. What we learn now is that the data speaks, right? We just need to learn to listen, as Alberto reminds us. So now Mary is going to demonstrate to you some of what we learned and accomplished when we went local. Take it away, Mary.
Hi, my name is Mary Esther Edwards. I'm a graduate research assistant with the OTOK group. Today I'll be discussing how to collaborate with a local juvenile justice office to aid in refining their data system and improving internal data collection and analysis. I will be using a case study as an example to explain the process that I used. This is the first of a two-part series. This video is part A, and I'll be discussing steps 1 through 7 of the data system creation process. I completed 2 different site visits. The first site visit was over a span of 3 days, while the second site visit lasted 2 days, and another graduate research assistant accompanied me to aid in data input. There are 9 different steps that I took, which I will call my data system creation process. I'll provide a quick overview of the process and then provide a more in-depth explanation of each step with examples. The 9 steps are to listen, read, create, elicit feedback and adjust, input data, elicit feedback and adjust, analyze and interpret, teach the process and maintain. Again, in this Part A video, we'll only review steps 1 through 7. Steps 8 and 9 will be covered in Part B. So let us begin. The first step is to listen. Elicit input from administrators and staff regarding proposals, grants, and reporting demands. Listen to office supervisors regarding reporting and other responsibilities. Listen to staff to understand their job duties and what kind of data would help them complete certain job functions aimed at improving efficiency and effectiveness. The second step is to read. Review all proposals, grants, and reporting guidelines to understand the administrator's needs and perspective. Read job duties and understand existing databases used. The third step is to create. Construct a template based on information gathered, following specific needs of each office. In this instance, I looked at my notes based on speaking with the staff in the office, reading over the proposals, grants, and annual reports from the previous year. From my notes, I created templates using Excel. Excel was chosen as this is what is already used by the office in their data collection system program. The fourth step is to elicit feedback. Seek feedback from administration, supervisors, and staff. At various times while in their office, I would ask different staff what they thought about the spreadsheets I created. For instance, should I add anything extra or take away a category? The fifth step is to adjust. Tailor the template based on feedback provided. Remember that these steps are not set in stone and often are done in conjunction with one another. For instance, eliciting feedback, adjusting, and active listening occurs throughout the whole data collection creation process. There were approximately 10 different spreadsheets created for the office to use internally, ranging from tracking employee mileage, monthly contact visits, and programming information. Here are some examples of templates that were created for the office. The first example is what I call the intake tracking sheet. This sheet was created to capture all the information that may be gleaned from the intake process, which includes the KDAI, the Kansas Detention Assessment Instrument, NTA, Notice to Appear, Level 1 and Level 2 intakes. The second example is what I call the supervisor dashboard. This is a spreadsheet that provides a snapshot of monthly summary information that can be used for monthly, quarterly, yearly audit of operations. This supervisor dashboard in particular would be used for intake staff as it captures NTAs, KDAIs, Level 1 and Level 2 assessments with demographic and summary information that can be used to describe the youth population whom receive the services or refer to juvenile services. The third example is a monthly tracking sheet that was created for the ISO, Intensive Supervision Officer, to aid in keeping track of their caseload. This sheet incorporates certain categories like service providers contact, violation reports, treatment hours and services, and eligibility for good time. Now that we have discussed 3 different examples of spreadsheets that were created, adjusted, and approved, we are now ready to move on to step 6. The 6th step is to input data, which pushes you to establish a routine for data entry. All offices will be different, and it is vital that the data analyst remains flexible and follows the office's internal protocol and directives. A plan should be discussed ahead of time to keep the data confidential and secure. I took extra precautions since I was inputting data for a vulnerable population. As you recall in the beginning of the video, I indicated that I completed 2 trips out to this particular office to complete the data collection process. The first trip I was by myself, and the second trip another graduate data analyst joined me. Before heading out on our second trip, the graduate data analyst was briefed on the office's internal regulations, the spreadsheets, and data input process. This brings us to the 7th step. The 7th step is to elicit feedback and adjust. Continue to reevaluate needs and available data. Remember to remain transparent to all the staff at every stage of the data collection and system creation process. Before we left the office, we reviewed all of the spreadsheets created, the data that was inputted in the sheets, and how to continue the data input process. In this video, we discuss steps 1 through 7 of the data creation process used in a partner site. These steps were to listen, read, create, elicit feedback, adjust, input data, elicit feedback, and adjust. The next video, labeled Part B, will discuss the last 2 steps of the data creation process, which are to analyze and interpret, and teach the process and maintain the system. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you real soon in Part B. And welcome to Part B of the data creation process. This process was used when I collaborated with the local juvenile justice office to aid in refining their data system and improving internal data collection and analysis. In this video, we'll discuss how to clean raw data for analysis and steps 8 and 9 of the data creation process. As a reminder, there were 9 steps that I followed within this data collection process, which were to listen, read, create, elicit feedback, adjust, input data, elicit feedback and adjust, analyze and interpret, and teach the process and maintain the system. Before I was able to continue to step 8, analyze and interpret, I had to clean the data to prepare it for me to analyze. Cleaning the data consisted of formatting the Excel sheet, which included all data being in the same font, size, and spelled consistently across all cells. Asking the field office for any missing information, eliminating duplicates, filling in blanks through common sense thinking or cognitive deduction. For instance, there were some cases that we had the police department's information, but the county of the youth was not filled out. Thus, by deductive reasoning, I filled in the county cell within the Excel spreadsheet by using the location of the police department. If I was unsure on any of the information, I asked the field office for clarification and for any missing data. Another tool that I used was Bloom's revised taxonomy, which helped me decide what type of analysis to run through understanding the various perspectives of how the data would be used. Some of the main pointers provided through using Bloom's revised taxonomy is to analyze the word choice that is used in the interpretation process. The point of view being used is based on the administrators' and supervisors' needs to understand the youth population being served in the office. Now that the data is ready to analyze, I begin the 8th step, which is to analyze and interpret, establish appropriate formulas, utilize data to inform decisions. Within this step, I used Excel basic formulas to utilize the data and make informed decisions based on the information I gathered through continued communication and active listening skills with the field offices as to what their needs are. Within this case study, the field office requested analysis on disproportionate minority contact, also known as DMC or red trends, specifically information regarding the Hispanic population, gender analysis, and language, focusing on non-English speakers. The next couple of graphs are based on the data collected from the 25th Judicial District from July 1st, 2019 through February 20th, 2020. This data covers information collected based on the intake officer's job duties, such as the completion of the Kansas Detention Assistant Instruments, the KDAIs, or receiving notices to appear, the NTAs, and completing Level 1 and Level 2 intakes on youth whom are referred to juvenile services. This table indicates that 53% of referrals completed only an intake between July 1st, 2019 through February 20th, 2020, while 9% had either a KDAI or NTA filled out. 38% of referred youths were involved in a combination of intake, NTA, and or KDAIs. The next graph breaks down the information based on geographical location. The 6 counties covered within the 25th Judicial District are Finney, Hamilton, Kearney, Scott, Wichita, and Greeley. The graph indicates that 67% of the youth referred had a KDAI, NTA, or intake completed originated out of Finney County. The next graph is a breakdown of how youth were referred to the 25th Judicial District Juvenile Services by ethnicity, Hispanic and non-Hispanic, and gender, male or female, from July 1st, 2019 through February 20th, 2020. In summary, 64% of the youth were identified as Hispanic, while 36% identified as non-Hispanic. 75% of youth were identified as male, while 25% were identified as female. Lastly, 48% of the youth were identified as Hispanic males, while 27% were identified as non-Hispanic males. This last graph focuses on the language that either the parents, guardians, and youth spoke, as translation services are used within the 25th Judicial District. According to this data, 75% of youth and or their guardians indicated that they speak English, while 25% spoke another language. 24% of the youth and or guardians indicated that their primary language is Spanish. When the data is broken down by counties within the 25th Judicial District, 27% of the youth and their guardians who resided in Finney County indicated that they speak Spanish. Lastly, the ninth step is to teach, process, and maintain. Build in practices to maintain the system. Before we left the field office the second time around, we held a review and training for the staff in the office. I reviewed each document, explaining the purpose and how to input new data, and how using the updated data system would be more efficient and useful. I also provided direct analysis of the data as requested by the administration. The creation of videos and handouts are available on the OTOK website at www.ourtownourkids.org. Thank you for watching and have a great day.